dollar.
All right, Dave, well, you preface that we've got a guest coming up. We've got Chidu Narayanan. He's APAC Head of Macro Strategy at Wells Fargo, joining us this morning. And Chidu, we'll start off with what Dave was just saying there. It seems like the forces are really aligning to continue to see dollar strength from here.
Indeed, that's right. We think that that's going to be the theme of the year for yet another year. We think that the dollar is going to be stronger, FX war is going to be higher. We possibly think that dollar is going to be another 3-4% higher from current levels. And if you look at the different scenarios, you have one, strong data in the US, which means that the theme of US exceptionalism continues. US is still going on steady while the rest of the world is softening in different at different degrees, which means that the dollar is going to be stronger. You have the Fed expected to be easing far less than what markets thought last year, while other central banks are continuing to ease, with the exception of the BOJ, which again means that rate differentials work in favor of the dollar. And you have a lot of the risks on the horizon. You have uncertainty on policy, uncertainty on trade, uncertainty on geopolitical tensions, all of which will increase risk aversion as and when that happens. And that, again, adds to a higher dollar. So in all roads lead to a stronger dollar for the year ahead.
Chidu, David here. It's horribly overvalued, though, currently. Sort of the reason I bring that up is that, you know, is valuation a useful indicator short term when I look at the FX markets?
Indeed, we don't think it's really overvalued per se. See, when we're talking about dollar being stronger through the year, it's not going to be a straight line appreciation of the dollar. It is going to be driven by data. It is going to be driven by central banks peak. It's going to be driven by events. But 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, we think that the dollar is going to be higher than where it is right now. Tomorrow, if there's going to be an event risk, if data is going to be softer, then the dollar could be marginally softer. But even in a scenario where US data starts to deteriorate, starts to show off, give away some of its strength, that could raise market worries about a significant recession. We think that the risks of a substantial slowdown, a global slowdown, is very, very underpriced, which then means that there's yet another reason for the dollar to be stronger.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it's a question of whether the dollar is really reflecting the fundamentals. But you mentioned that risk that maybe we see a global slowdown. Which currency do you think looks most exposed in that sort of environment?
Right. We'll need to see how exactly the slowdown itself happens and whether it's a tariff-driven slowdown or whether it's a global demand-driven slowdown. In all scenarios, the dollar is generally stronger, and we think that the yen is probably a little bit more resilient amongst the majors, amongst the G10. The yen being a bit of a risk haven, a risk-off currency, will still depreciate against the dollar, but possibly not as much as, say, the likes of the euro or the Aussie. We also think that the CNH and Northeast Asian FX, EMFX in general, is quite vulnerable to a stronger dollar, weaker global growth, tariff risks when that's imposed. And if the CNH is going to be weaker, then that means that a lot of the high beta currencies, the likes of Korean won, the likes of Latin American FX, would also be that much more weaker than the CNH itself.
Yeah, Chidu, I think you are one of the long trade recommendations you're making is, you know, long the yen against the won. Do you have a timeline for that? Do you have a target for that specific pair?
See, we've been short the won for a while now, for a couple of months now, and we entered this trade pre-election, late October, and it's worked fairly well so far. The reason why we like to pair the yen and the won together is gives you the ability to hold on to that trade for the longer term. The yen's likely to be underperforming against the dollar, but still a bit more resilient. The won, we think, could be heading closer to 1,500. This is irrespective of the political tensions that are onshore. Growth is generally weaker. The BOK has moved its focus from inflation to growth as inflation has started to be a little bit more contained. And if, again, the CNH is going to 760, as we expect to happen over the next few months, then that means that the won's going to be much further exposed in that scenario. So we think that the dollar won probably goes to 1,500 through to the end of the year, and yen won possibly could be heading towards 980 or 10.
What about your dollar yuan forecast? Because you just mentioned those there. We could see, for instance, 7.6 on the offshore by the end of the second quarter of this year. What do you make then of that sort of pushback that we're seeing from the PBOC?
Actually, this was exactly how we had expected, how we had anticipated that to happen. We think that the yuan is going to be weaker purely because of a lot of domestic weakness that you've been talking about also, and we've been talking about for a few years now. Not too much has changed on that front. The domestic weakness still persists. A lot of the activity onshore is driven by external support, by the export environment, and that might start to weaken as global demand possibly starts to slow down, as tariffs start to kick in. All of that is going to be weakening. So we think that the yuan is going to be softer purely from a domestic perspective. Layer to that the stronger dollar, increased risk aversion because of tariffs. We think that dollar yen goes to 760 by second half of or the second quarter, and 770 by the second half of the year. Again, the PBOC is going to be stepping in. They don't want an completely unruly depreciation from the CNH. They want dollar CNH to be higher, but they want it to be very contained. So they will use up all their tools. They've used counter-cyclical adjustments in the fixing. They've pushed up the CNH HIBOR, making liquidity tighter. We're seeing the fixing error now close to about 1,400 pips, which is as high as it was in the early part of last year. And we've seen a very strong correlation between that fixing error, which is the PBOC pushing back against weakening expectations on the fixing, and the strength of the dollar itself. The DXY and the fixing error seems to be going 1-to-1, and a higher dollar, much stronger external headwinds for a weaker CNH, the more the PBOC will be pushing back against slowing down the depreciation, but not changing the direction of depreciation.
Yeah, Chidu, I'm curious because we're showing now a graphic, you probably see it on your screens too, of the point you just made, CNH HIBOR surging yesterday. And, well, I wonder, do you think this is the PBOC at work? Did they intervene in markets yesterday? Did they squeeze the shorts?
See, we've seen this play out in the past. The chart you had shows 2021, you see 2016, 2017. You had, it probably pales in comparison, this tightening that we're seeing this week compared to what happened in 2016, 2017. So yes, there are a ton of tools that the PBOC can use to dissuade significant one-way depreciation expectations. So we think that the PBOC does not want a stronger CNH. They just don't want weaker CNH to be unruly, and they don't want expectations of one-sided depreciation to be setting in. They've been fighting back against market expectations of one-sided depreciation for several years and have had success over the last few years. You don't want to be letting go of that success in your bid for a weaker FX.
Absolutely, yeah. To your point, if we take the chart back to 2015, you barely see what's taken place yesterday. Chidu, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much. Chidu Narayanan, their head of macro strategy, APAC, at Wells Fargo, head of macro strategy for the Asia Pacific. Coming up, a Chinese actor who went missing near the Thai border with Myanmar last week has finally